The year was 1867, and the Arizona sun bore down with a cruelty that turned the earth itself against a man. Dust rose in sheets across the flats, shimmering like heat-born ghosts, and not a bird dared to cry out. Elias Turner, lean as a fence post and twice as brittle, stumbled along the fence line of his pitiful ranch. The boards leaned at odd angles, the wires slack and rusted. Once, he dreamed of building a herd so large the land itself would tremble beneath its weight. Now, he was lucky if he could keep the coyotes from the last of his scrawny cattle. He wiped a hand across his brow, leaving a streak of dirt and sweat. His shirt clung damp to his back. His boots, cracked and worn, whispered against the dry earth. Every step sounded louder than it should, as though the world had grown quiet just to listen to him fail. Elias stopped at a half-dead mesquite tree, catching his breath, his hand gripping the rough bark. His gaze swept the horizon. Empty. Always empty. That was the way of his life. Wife gone in childbirth, son buried beside her, ranch stripped by drought and debt. The land mocked him with silence. Then came the sound. Not wind. Not the groan of wood. A crunch, deliberate, heavy, close. Elias straightened, heart slamming his ribs. His hand went for the revolver at his hip. The leather creaked, the gun half drawn. And then they appeared. Two figures, tall, shadows against the sun. Women, but not like any Elias had ever seen. They were strong, broad-shouldered, muscled, their black hair braided with beads and feathers that caught the light. Apache. The taller one carried a spear, the other a bow strung and ready. Their dark eyes fixed on him, unblinking. For a moment, Elias thought they were spirits come to claim him. He'd heard the stories, Apache warriors fierce as fire, women said to be as merciless as the men. Stay back. Elias rasped, his voice hoarse. He raised the revolver, hands trembling. Stay back, or by God I'll... The taller sister moved first. No hesitation. She swept the spear. With such speed, Elias barely saw it, until the shaft cracked against his wrist. Pain exploded. The revolver clattered into the dust. Before he could recover, the other sister lunged. Her bow wasn't fired. It was swung like a club, striking him across the temple. Stars burst in his vision. He staggered, fighting for balance. Elias swung wild with his fists. He caught nothing but air. A knee drove into his gut, folding him. Breath gone. He collapsed to one knee, choking on dust. They didn't speak to him. Not a word. Only sharp commands to each other in their tongue, clipped and fast. Their voices were like flint on stone. Elias tried to rise again. A hand caught his hair, yanking him upright. The taller sister's eyes bore into his, black and bottomless. She shoved him back hard. His spine hit the mesquite tree. Something lashed around his wrists. A rawhide thong, quick, practiced. The smaller sister worked, with quiet efficiency, binding his arms behind him. Elias twisted, cursed, but her grip was iron. Why? He managed to croak. I've done nothing to you. The taller one hissed, a sound like a rattler. Then she pushed him forward. Elias stumbled, feet dragging through dust. He fought the bindings until his skin burned, but the thong only bit deeper. His chest heaved, his breath shallow. Every step they forced from him was another step away from his land, his last patch of dirt, his last claim at calling himself a man. They drove him west, across scrubland cut by gullies and jagged stone. The sky bled orange as the sun sank lower. Shadows stretched long and strange, like reaching fingers. The silence was worse than their blows. Elias begged, cursed, even tried to bargain. The sisters answered only with nudges of spear or sharp tugs on the binding rope. Once, when he dragged his feet too much, the taller jabbed the spear point into his shoulder, not enough to pierce, but enough to remind him how close death waited. Hours passed. Elias's throat turned raw, his tongue thick. The desert offered no mercy. The sisters walked tireless, their strides long and steady. They looked carved from the very stone they crossed. At one point, from a ridge above, came the yowl of a mountain lion. Elias froze, his body quaking, but the sisters did not. The taller one threw back her head and loosed a cry, a piercing, defiant wail that split the air. The smaller joined her, their voices twining like thunder and storm. The owl faded, swallowed by silence. Elias's fear shifted. These weren't mere women. They were warriors, guardians of something greater than themselves. He felt smaller under their gaze than he had ever felt in front of a banker, a foreman, or even a priest. Night fell by the time they paused. A fire was kindled in a shallow canyon, flames throwing jagged shadows against the walls. Elias was shoved to the ground, his hands still bound. He lay, gasping, the taste of blood in his mouth. The sisters sat across from him, their eyes reflecting the flames. They ate dried meat, passed a skin of water between them. Not once did they offer him food. Only at the last did the calmer sister walk over and pour a trickle of water down his throat. Elias drank like a dying man, choking and coughing, but grateful despite himself. When she pulled the skin away, their eyes met. For a heartbeat, Elias thought he saw something other than contempt, something softer, hidden. Then she turned away, silent. Sleep came ragged. Every noise in the dark jolted Elias awake, the crack of a twig, the hiss of wind, the cry of some far-off coyote. His wrists throbbed, raw and swollen. His pride ached worse. He thought of his wife. Sarah's face, pale in the lamplight, the night fever took her. His son's tiny grave, marked with nothing more than a wooden cross that the wind had long since knocked down. He thought of the bank note folded in his pocket, the one he could never pay. Maybe this was the end he deserved. Not a bullet, not the noose. Just dragged into the wild by two Apache sisters who had no reason to spare him. Dawn painted the canyon walls red as blood. Elias was yanked to his feet. His legs were stiff, his back screaming. The sisters wasted no time. They pushed him onward, deeper into country no white man dared tread. By midday, the land opened into a wide valley. Smoke curled skyward. Elias's stomach dropped. The village lay before him. Dozens of lodges, hide and wood. Horses tied to posts, their tails swishing. Children darted between fires, their laughter sharp and high. Women worked hides, their hands quick and skilled. Men stood in clusters, spears and rifles close at hand. As Elias was shoved forward, the noise faded. Conversations died. Eyes turned. A white man bound, filthy, dragged between two Apache women. That was a sight to still a village. The sisters pulled him into the circle of fire at the village's center. The people closed in, a living wall of faces, some curious, some hateful, others unreadable. And then he came, the chief, broad, shoulders like stone, hair streaked with gray, but his eyes alive with fire. He wore no gaudy headdress, no trinkets for show. Power didn't need display. It radiated from him like heat. The sisters spoke, voices firm, recounting their capture. Elias couldn't follow the words, but he caught the rhythm, the taller sister sharp, almost triumphant. The calmer one measured, deliberate. The chief listened without interruption. His eyes never left Elias. When silence fell, he stepped forward. Elias tried to stand tall, though his knees wanted to give. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out. "I've no quarrel with you. I've harmed no one. Whatever you think, it's a mistake." The chief's gaze bore through him. Then he said something in his tongue. The crowd murmured. Elias couldn't understand the words, but he understood the weight, judgment. A drumbeat began, slow and steady. Children hushed. Women pulled back. Men crossed their arms, eyes like knives. Elias swallowed hard. His mouth was dry as dust. In that moment, he knew. He wasn't standing in a village. He was standing in a courtroom, and the verdict that waited would not come from any judge in Tucson or preacher in Prescott. It would come from the eyes of the Apache. Elias Turner thought his story ended there, in the shadow of firelight, surrounded by enemies. But fate doesn't always kill a man where he expects. Sometimes it drags him deeper, where his own heart becomes the battleground. The fire at the center of the Apache camp burned high, its smoke rising into the indigo sky. Elias Turner stood bound, his shoulders stiff, his wrists raw from the thong that held them. All around, a ring of faces stared at him, lit red and gold by the flames. Men with hard eyes, women with lips pressed thin, children clutching at their mother's skirts. He had been brought here as an intruder, and though the air was warm, Elias felt a coldness settle deep into his bones. The chief stepped forward, his shadow long against the ground. His gaze never wavered from Elias, and when he spoke, the words rolled out low and steady, the weight of authority behind them. The villagers listened in silence, every syllable sinking like a stone in water. Elias caught nothing but the cadence, sharp at times, soft at others, ending in a tone that felt final. The taller sister spoke then, her voice taut, edged with steel. She gestured at Elias, her words clipped and fast, and though he could not understand, her meaning was plain. He was guilty, a trespasser, a thief of land and breath. The calmer sister followed, her tone different, less fire, more balance. She spoke as though laying facts bare, rather than stoking anger. The crowd murmured, restless, divided. Elias's chest heaved. He couldn't bear the silence pressing in on him. "I've stolen nothing," he said, his voice rough, carrying over the fire. "I came west for the same reason any man does, to build a life. If my cattle wandered, it wasn't to take what wasn't mine." A spear but struck the earth beside his foot, startling him into silence. One of the warriors barked a command. Elias shut his mouth. The chief lifted his hand, and the noise stilled. He looked at Elias long enough to make sweat bead down his spine. Then the chief spoke again, slower now, and when he finished, a woman translated into broken English. Her words carried like the verdict of a hanging judge. "You stand accused," she said, "of walking on Apache land without right, of hunting what is not yours, of taking water when your people sign no peace. For this, the council will judge you." The weight of it pressed down hard. Elias wanted to shout that it was all a mistake, that he was just a man trying to keep alive in a land that cared nothing for him. But the eyes that held him said it would make no difference. His word was worth nothing here. The council of elders formed a circle, old men with hair white as sagebrush smoke and faces carved with time. They sat cross-legged, drums slow and steady, their voices weaving questions. A young boy repeated them in halting English. "Why do you cross into the canyon?" Elias swallowed. "My herd was hungry. The grass is gone near my place. I didn't think," he faltered, realizing how weak it sounded. "I didn't mean to steal." The boy translated. The elders muttered among themselves. Another question came. "Why should Apache believe your words? Your people break promises?" Elias clenched his jaw. He thought of the bank agent in Prescott, the one who smiled as he wrote Elias's debt across paper like it was already carved on his grave. He thought of soldiers who rode roughshod across the territory, burning villages when it suited them. He knew what the elders meant, but still, he barked back, "I'm not them. I don't carry a uniform or a banker's ledger. I'm a man same as you, fighting to live." The boy stammered through the translation. The elders frowned. Murmurs rose like wind before a storm. The chief raised his hand again, calling silence. He spoke briefly, then the woman translated with grim finality. "You will face the trial of fire. If your spirit is strong, the people will see it. If not," she did not finish. She didn't need to. They stripped Elias of his boots and socks, leaving his feet bare against the cold dirt. Warriors dragged a heavy log from the edge of the fire, oak blackened, thick as a fence post. They set it across his shoulders until it bowed his back. The drumbeat grew louder, steadier, as warriors raked coals from the fire into a line glowing like a serpent's back. Elias stared at it, stomach hollowing. The heat shimmered, the coals hissing. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to run, to spit in their faces. But the raw hide bit into his wrists, and the eyes of the Apache burned hotter than the fire. The calmer sister stepped close. She untied the thong at his wrists, her fingers quick, her face unreadable. For a heartbeat, Elias thought he saw pity flicker in her gaze. Then it was gone, and her hands shoved the log firmer onto his back. "Walk," a warrior barked. Elias grit his teeth. He stepped forward, the weight crushing down, the heat searing up. The first touch of coal burned, like iron fresh from the forge. He hissed, every nerve screaming. "Step!" Smoke rose, the smell of singed flesh sharp in his nostrils. His knees trembled, but he forced them straight. The drumbeat hammered in his skull. Step! Each coal bit him, fire racing through his veins. The log wobbled as his arms weakened, but he locked his jaw, staring ahead at the line's end. Step! Halfway now. His breath came ragged. The taller sister stood at the far side, arms crossed, eyes hard. She tilted her chin as if daring him to collapse. Step! The calmer sister's gaze flicked, soft for the barest instant, as though she willed him to go on. Elias seized that shred of silent encouragement. Step! His legs buckled. The log nearly rolled from his shoulders. The crowd gasped, a ripple of anticipation. But Elias roared, a sound pulled from the bottom of his lungs, and forced himself upright. Step! At last, he stumbled clear of the coals. He dropped the log, collapsing to his knees. His feet were blistered, skin-torn and raw. Sweat streamed down his face, his body shuddering. The drums ceased. Silence swept the camp. The elders' faces remained still, unreadable, but the people murmured low, surprised. The chief's eyes narrowed, but a spark glinted there. Not approval, not yet, but recognition. Elias wanted to shout that he'd done it, that he wasn't just some broken rancher dragged to slaughter. But no sound left his mouth, only gasps of breath. That night, they tied him near the fire once more. His feet throbbed with every heartbeat. He lay half delirious, staring at the stars sharp above. The calmer sister approached. She crouched, offering a gourd of water. Her hand brushed his as she tipped it. And though her face gave nothing away, Elias felt a strange warmth spread in him, deeper than the water. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered, his voice cracked. She tilted her head, eyes unreadable in the firelight. Then she spoke a single word in her tongue. He didn't know its meaning, but it sounded neither cruel nor kind. Something in between, like judgment held in check. She stood and walked away, leaving him with questions he could not name. Sleep came, restless, full of dreams where fire licked his body and voices called from the shadows. He woke at dawn, throat raw, his skin clammy. The village stirred, fires rekindled, horses snorting. The council gathered again. The chief stood, his presence heavy as stone. He spoke long, his words rolling like distant thunder. The woman translated at the end, "You have shown strength. But one trial is not enough. The people must see more. At sunrise tomorrow, your fate will be decided." Elias sagged, his body hollow. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. They would stretch this out until he broke or begged for death. The taller sister leaned against her spear, eyes sharp, measuring him. The calmer one watched from the edge, her face softer, yet her gaze no less piercing. Elias realized they were not just his captors, they were his judges. Every step, every breath he took now weighed on their scales. He sat in the dust as the council dispersed, the murmurs of the tribes swirling around him. For the first time since his capture, Elias understood that what he faced was not just a trial of his life. It was a trial of who he was, and though fear gnawed at him, something else flickered beneath it. A spark he hadn't felt in years. Maybe not since Sarah's death. Not since his ranch began to rot around him. That night, as the firelight danced and the tribe's voices rose in low songs, Elias sat bound, staring into the flames. His body was weak, but his mind sharpened. Tomorrow, they would call for his final judgment. He no longer feared the fire or the weight of logs. What he feared now was failing whatever unseen measure they placed upon him. Because somehow, against his will, he wanted to meet it. When dawn's light spilled over the canyon walls, Elias understood this wasn't just a trial of his life. It was a trial of his soul, and the ones holding the scales were not his enemies, but the daughters of a chief whose judgment could remake him or destroy him. The dawn came sharp and cold, the kind of chill that cut through even the driest desert air. Smoke curled lazily from the fires in the Apache camp, drifting above the lodges and vanishing into the pale sky. Elias Turner sat bound near the fire pit, his shoulders stiff, his feet still raw from the trial of coals. He had survived the night, though his body trembled with weakness. The chief stood before the people once more, his figure framed by the rising sun. His voice carried the authority of stone, grinding against stone. Every word was slow, deliberate, final. When he finished, the woman interpreter stepped forward, her English rough but clear. "Today," she said, "the white man faces his last trial. He will go into the wild with nothing but a knife. He must bring back food for the people before the sun falls. If he fails, he dies." The murmur that swept through the crowd was a storm barely held in check. Elias's stomach knotted, but he lifted his chin. At least it was something he understood. Hunting. Surviving. It was work a man could wrap his hands around. A warrior tossed him a knife, long, iron, the edge chipped but sharp enough. Elias caught it clumsily, his wrists still stiff from bindings. His eyes flicked to the sisters. The taller one leaned on her spear, lips pressed in a thin, merciless line. The calmer sister's gaze lingered longer, unreadable, though there was the faintest spark in her dark eyes, something Elias couldn't name. The chief gestured, and two warriors pushed Elias toward the canyon's edge. The land stretched before him, wide and cruel, jagged ridges, dry riverbeds, cactus standing like sentries. The knife felt small in his hand, almost laughably so, but it was all he had. He began to walk. The first hour was nothing but stone and silence. His feet screamed with each step, his skin cracked and burned from the sun. He kept moving, every breath drawn through clenched teeth. He thought of Sarah, his wife, her voice on the night before she passed. "Don't you quit, Eli," she had whispered, her fingers weak against his hand. "Don't you ever quit." The words steadied him. By midday, hunger gnawed at him, sharp and cruel. His throat was dry, his lips split. He stumbled into a dry arroyo, scanning the earth for tracks. And then there, hoof prints. Fresh, too small for horse, too sharp. Javelina. Elias crouched low, heart quickening. He followed the prints into a thicket of mesquite. The smell hit him first, rank, musky. Then the sound, the soft grunt of an animal rooting. He moved slow, knife ready. The brush parted, and he saw it. A wild boar, tusks curling, hide bristled. It rooted the earth with furious hunger, snorting dust. Elias's stomach clenched with equal hunger, but fear coiled in his gut. He had no rifle, no rope, no second chance. Only the knife. He gripped it tighter. The wind shifted. The boar's head jerked up. Small eyes locked on him. A hiss escaped its throat, followed by a screech that tore through the still air. Then it charged. Elias barely had time to brace. He threw himself aside as the beast thundered past, dust spraying. The tusks sliced the air inches from his leg. Elias scrambled up, heart slamming. The boar wheeled, pawing at the dirt, then lunged again. This time Elias didn't run. He leapt to the side, slashing with the knife. The blade scraped hide, drawing blood but not enough to stop it. The boar spun, faster than he thought possible. Its tusk grazed his thigh, tearing fabric and skin. Pain flared hot and sharp. He stumbled, almost falling. The boar charged again, and desperation drove him forward. He threw himself atop it, knife plunging. The beast screamed, bucking, slamming him into stone. His ribs ached, his breath gone, but he clung tight, driving the blade deeper. Blood sprayed his hands, hot and slick. The boar thrashed, twisting, nearly unseating him. Elias roared, a sound more animal than man, and drove the knife into its throat. The beast convulsed once, then collapsed, its weight nearly crushing him. Elias rolled off, gasping, every inch of him shaking. His thigh burned, his ribs ached, but he was alive. The boar lay still, blood pooling in the dust. For a long moment, Elias stared at it, chest heaving. Then he laughed, wild, broken, but alive. He had done it. Dragging the carcass was a nightmare. The beast was heavy, and Elias's body screamed with every tug. Sweat drenched him, dust coated him, blood from his wound trickled down his leg. But he pulled, step after step, until the canyon walls rose again. The sun dipped low when he staggered back into the village, the boar dragging behind him. The people fell silent. Children gaped, women covered their mouths, men narrowed their eyes. Elias dropped the carcass in the dust, his body collapsing beside it. He lay, gasping, sweat and blood streaking his skin, knife still clutched in his trembling hand. The taller sister's eyes widened, though she masked it quickly with her usual hard stare. The calmer sister stepped forward, kneeling beside him. She touched his arm, light as a breeze, her eyes soft with something he hadn't seen directed at him in years, respect. The chief stepped close. His shadow fell across Elias, heavy as judgment itself. He studied the carcass, then the man who had dragged it here half dead. His face revealed nothing. Then he spoke, voice rolling deep. The interpreter raised her chin. You have proven you are not weak. You have faced fire and beast and did not break. You are not Apache, but you are not nothing. The words hung heavy. Not an embrace, not a pardon, but something, a recognition. Elias swallowed, his throat raw. He forced himself upright, swaying. His eyes met the chief's. For the first time since this nightmare began, he didn't feel like a condemned man. He felt judged, measured, and found worth something. The taller sister stepped forward. She leveled her spear at him, her eyes hard as obsidian. Do not betray this chance, she said in halting English. The accent was thick, the words clumsy, but the meaning struck sharp. Elias nodded. He had no words, only the weight of his promise. The calmer sister's gaze lingered longer. Her lips curved, just slightly a ghost of a smile. Elias felt the strangest warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt since Sarah was alive. The chief raised his arms. The tribe murmured, then broke into movement. The boar was dragged to the fires, knives flashing as the women began to dress the meat. Children darted past, glancing at Elias with wide eyes. He sat in the dust, exhausted, watching the flames leap higher. He thought of his ranch, crumbling and empty. He thought of Sarah's grave, alone on the hill. He thought of the fire, the coals, the boar's tusks. And he thought of the sisters, their strength, their judgment, their strange mercy. The night grew alive with song and drum. The meat roasted, the smell rich and thick. Elias was given a strip, charred and dripping. He ate like a starving man, tears burning his eyes at the simple gift of food. For the first time in years, he felt alive. The chief watched him from across the fire. The taller sister leaned against her spear, unyielding as ever. The calmer one sat near, silent but close, her eyes flicking to him now and again, as though to make sure he stayed. Elias knew he wasn't free. He knew tomorrow might bring another test, another debt. But something inside him had shifted. He was no longer just a broken rancher dragged by force. He was a man who had faced trial, and in the eyes of strangers, proved his worth. The flames cracked, sparks rising into the dark. The drums slowed, the songs fading. Elias leaned back, staring at the stars sharp against the black. His body was broken, but his spirit was lit with a fire he thought long dead. And as the night closed in, a voice seemed to whisper in his ear. Not Sarah's, not the tribe's, but something deeper. The frontier wasn't just a place. It was a crucible. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this. Judgment doesn't always come from the gallows or the gun. Sometimes it comes from the people you least expect. And when it does, a man either breaks beneath it or rises reborn. Elias Turner had walked into fire and beast and blood. He had been dragged before strangers who owed him nothing. And still he rose. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only verdict that ever mattered.